What's up, guys? My name is Joe Hatagwa, and if you want to hear the answers to your questions, the questions that you guys want to know, then this is the video for you. Oh, wait, before we get into that, the questions about me living on the continent of Africa, because there's so many questions, and I never get a chance to get to all of them. So now is your time. If you got any questions you want to ask, then this is the video for you. All right. So let's start by saying this. As you might notice, I'm in a different location, undisclosed location. I'm actually in the United States right now for something personal family matters. But I wanted to kind of get on here and answer your questions. There's so many questions that people have, and I want to answer those questions. But the first thing I want to say is Instagram and YouTube have been giving me some serious challenges and problems as a content creator. And I'm going to need you guys' help to continue to make content. And so I've launched other platforms, other channels, other ways that you could watch content. And I'll be sharing that shortly, momentarily. But I do have a Patreon now. I will be opening an OnlyFans. And those, of course, will all be within the realm of the same kind of content we've been talking about and doing. So none of that other kind of content that people might do on an OnlyFans. This is strictly content around living on the continent, what that experience is like, talking to different people who've moved to the continent, and just helping people understand what it is to be here. Somebody just tried to call me, so I just want to make sure we're all good. Sorry, I just want to double check to make sure that something's not wrong. Can you guys let me know if you can hear me? Because I'm unable to go live on Instagram. Instagram will not allow me to go live at this moment. They haven't explained to me why. I'm also unable to do collaborations on Instagram now as well. So this is a little bit confusing and disturbing. But it just comes with the territory, right? If you're focused on Pan-Africanism and advancing the continent, for whatever reason, many of us in this space, we start running into these issues. And so it's a serious issue right now that for whatever reason, I am unable to go live on Instagram. I'm still able to go live on Facebook, which is under the Instagram umbrella. Which is under the Meta umbrella, but I'm unable to go live on Instagram. I'm unable to do collaborations for some reason. If you try to collaborate with me on the collaborative posts like African Stream does, I don't show up. It grays me out. And then if I go to try to collaborate with them, the option for collaboration is just not even there. You know how you get tag a person, add a collaborator? I don't even have that option. And then I can't go live for whatever reason. I've gotten this notification. I think I'll show you guys the notification so you guys can see it. This to me was strange, but I thought, I don't know what it is. And so I'm going to have to try to reach out to someone at Instagram to see if I can get an understanding of what this is. Because to me, it's kind of out of nowhere. So I don't know if you guys can see my screen right now, but as you can see, it says at this time, your account is not eligible to use this feature. Try again later. I mean, I don't even know what that is. So I just wanted to kind of make mention of that because, you guys will start to see that I'm going to start operating with different ways to communicate with you all and to ensure that you guys are still getting this information. So Instagram obviously is the biggest platform, and so anytime anything happens there, it is a bit concerning. We're approaching 200. We're approaching 300,000, and I've been frozen at 288,000 followers for the last 5 days, and the number of new followers hasn't grown. Strangely enough, they asked me to approve some new followers. So, I've left the country that I was in. I was in Sierra Leone. I'm in the U.S. right now. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but there has been some interesting developments on that platform. Equally, YouTube has been having some similar challenges as well, just around, bearing my content, making sure that people don't see it. We thought we turned a corner on that, but it seems as though we're back. So, as anyone who's out there who's a content creator, do not put your entire life into content, because that will drive you crazy. They can make decisions that have nothing to do with you, and it can be very challenging. So anyway, with that, who do we have? So we got Menelik here, and it looks like we have Aisha. Aisha says, Kushel Fambu. What's up, Aisha? Welcome. So let me know if you guys can hear me. Give me a thumbs up so I know you guys can hear me, and let me know where you're watching from. Unfortunately, I am not live on Instagram right now, as I mentioned, and because there's some challenges, I cannot go live on Instagram. But today I'm here to answer the questions that people have been asking me. There are a lot of questions that I get. Many of them I've answered on previous lives, but there's a few that I thought I could spend some time on today. I don't have a lot of time today, so we're going to try to keep this short and get right to the questions. But I want to give a little bit of time for more people to join, and I also want to make sure you guys can hear me. So both Menelik and Aisha did say hello, but I don't know if you guys can all hear me. So can you guys give me a thumbs up on any platform if you can hear me, and then also let me know where you're watching from. Looks like there's a couple people watching from Twitter. Nice. And there's a couple people watching from Facebook. We got a good number, on YouTube. So give me a thumbs up. Let me know where you're watching from. For those of you watching on Twitter, I'm not even sure I can see your messages. So let me head over to Twitter to see if you guys are commenting, if I can see it. Going live on Twitter is something I haven't spent a significant amount of time doing. And so sometimes I'm a little bit unaware of how that process works. So I'm looking right now. I see it showing up. I definitely see it showing up on the platform, but what I can't see is if you guys are commenting. So yeah. All right, cool. So we're going to get right into it. I mean, look, there are a bunch of questions that people ask. I usually do a presentation. I'm not going to do it though. Okay, so real quick, here's an interesting one. So Aisha says, yep, I can hear you. She's on YouTube. I'm ready to buy land and buy something already built, wondering pros and cons and how much one should save and expect to come with. It's a great question. It's a good question to start with. So for those of you who don't know, I do have a consulting service. And so many times I speak to people individually about their specific situations and help them understand what makes the most sense for them. As someone who's lived on the continent for going on 4 years, I have a little bit of insight. Beyond that, I had been going back to Sierra Leone twice a year for 3 years prior to that. So I spent the last 7 years of my life frequenting Sierra Leone, and then 2 years straight living in Ghana. And so to answer this specific question, the pros and cons of buying versus building. So the thing is, when you buy a pre-built house, right? One of the things that you find some people find it as a con is they can't fully customize it themselves. A lot of times, depending on where you're buying, if you're buying in one of those housing developments, they have a cookie cutter way of building these houses and you just get it as is, right? So when it comes to resale value or renting it, it's always going to be based on the look and feel of how the developer decided they wanted to do it. So that's one of the negatives potentially. The positives, though, are that you don't have to think about any of that, right? You just buy it as is, and you utilize it however you want to utilize it. So you can look at the pros and cons there. I think it depends on what you're looking to do. If you are buying a standalone house, right? Then I think one of the things you have to think about is, the possibilities doing like a real inspection like you do in the United States, buying from someone else who's built the house is unlikely. So you don't know if there are structural issues. You don't know what issues that are there unless you're living there. And I can tell you that firsthand from living in the guest house now, and this is something that I was involved in throughout the lifetime of the project. And so, there are just these things that you just won't notice. Like I have doors that don't close properly, I should say. I have locks that don't work properly. I have doorways that are misaligned. I have leaks, things that you just don't know unless you're living there. So those are some things you have to take into consideration when buying from someone else. On the other end of the spectrum, if you decide you want to build, building comes with its own challenges. And by the way, these challenges are across the board for the majority of the continent, right? So we're talking about I've known people who've bought and bought and homes and land and built on land in Nigeria and in Ghana and in Sierra Leone. People in Ivory Coast as well, and I know people doing it in Kenya and Uganda as well. And some of the same challenges persist no matter where you are on the continent. From these conversations that I've had with folks, right? And so, but when you're buying land and building on your own, now it comes down to finding the right contractor. What I have found is, in general, if you decide to go with an individual, there's a couple of different things that you have to know when you decide to do that. If you're going with an individual because you want to cut some of your costs, you have to ensure that they have an engineer that just makes sure that they're doing everything right, and structurally this property will stand the test of time. Two, you also have to keep in mind that if you're going with an individual, like a one-person show with just a couple of workers and a plumber that they contract out sometimes, an electrician that they contract out sometimes, what some of the challenges you'll find with someone like that is they also have the challenge of spreading themselves too thin, and they can't be everywhere all the time, and they don't have a team of people, competent people that can be somewhere. Now you're saving costs because you're paying an individual, not an organization that has multiple people within the organization that are actually like kind of full-time employees. And so what you'll find is where you're saving costs on building and just the execution of the building, you are gaining stress in other areas, right? And so so you have kind of two options when it comes to building. You have the idea of getting that single entity individual who is going to keep your costs low. The labor costs may not be so much. But on the other end of that, they don't have the infrastructure in place to ensure that everything is done properly. So, generally you're going to want to go to a company if you want to ensure that things are done properly and that they don't spread themselves too thin. Because the head of that organization is going to be checking out properties here, there, and everywhere, especially if they're good. But if they have foremen, if they have engineers, and if they have other folks that operate, they have many folks that operate at different properties, and they can stagger their time at your property or both be at your property at the same time, that's probably going to be the way you want to go if you're going to pay to have your house built. If you're going to do that, though, it's going to cost you a lot more. And you have to be careful of who you go with. There are many different companies out there, even big companies that do commercial buildings that cost a lot of money and do not appropriately build based on the things that you need, right? And so you have to take into consideration the work that they've done before, structurally stay in a house or at least go to places that they've built. I spent a lot of time with the contractors that I've looked at and attempted to work with, going and seeing their other properties. But now that I have built a property, I know better what to look for. And I also know better what to ask about, right? Because that was something that took me a little while to get and to understand. So if you guys want like a deeper understanding of that, and you guys want me to go step by step with that, you want to do a one-on-one conversation with me, more than happy to do that. You'll see the link in the description, or you can go to my profile, depending on where you're watching this, the link in my profile, and you'll be able to see, schedule some time with me one-on-one to really talk this through. And I know some of you have asked to do that. I've been traveling this week, but I'll be back next week, and I'll work to schedule that time with all those folks that have been hitting me up. Now Aisha had, well, first, real quickly before I move on, Auntie Alice is here. Hey, Auntie Alice, I just saw her yesterday. All right, so Aisha says, knowing there are issues with water, power, and internet, what solutions can you prep to have as backup alternatives? I know solar is one. What others? So yeah, that's a great question. So solar is one solution to power. So let's start with power. Now, with power, you have three main options in terms of your own personal living in Sierra Leone. You have the electrical company, which is EDSA. You have solar, which is expensive, right? Anywhere between, depending on what you're asking for and what you're getting, it can be as low as like $700 for some, really tiny, only no appliances usage, maybe fans, not even like a fridge really, up to, or maybe a freezer, but up to like you want a full-fledged off the grid solution that's going to cost you $10,000 for a 3-bedroom house, right? So it really depends on what you want, but in general, most people are quoted around $2,000 to $3,000, depending on what it is that you want to run. You want to run a refrigerator, you want to watch TV, you want to have an AC or whatever on. It's gonna cost you upwards of $3,000, right? And so those are the things you kind of have to think about when you're thinking about solar. And then, of course, the other option, which is a noisier option, and it is an option that requires continuous maintenance, and that's the generator, right? Generators are what is used mainly in Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone, at least the countries the ones that I've visited, those countries. Gambia, same thing. Everyone has solar in those countries, but solar is not as widely used depending on what kind of products you have in your house, because it's pretty costly. So to answer your question, those are the 3 options. I recommend, to be honest, if you have the budget, solar is your second option. So you just have to buy big enough batteries and enough batteries to cover all of the voltage that you're going to be using, right? So that's, batteries and the panels are going to be where most of your costs are. And so you're going to have to kind of think that through. There's also the option of a hybrid version where some people don't even put panels on the top for solar. They just have the batteries charged by EDSA. So whenever EDSA's on, it charges the batteries. Whenever EDSA's off, the batteries are in use. So that's one way that you can go about doing it as well. It all depends on your budget. Anne Maria Harding's in the house. What's up, Anne Marie? So I would say that is what. Those are the options for power. And again, if you guys want to talk a little bit more with me and you want to look at some of the quotes that I've seen and what options are available, you can reach out to me to do a consultation. Again, in the replay of this video, that'll be in the description. But you guys can reach out to me via email if you want. And in my email, I will give you those answers if you would like. So you can email me here. The information is there, just scrolling across the screen. And you can do Authentic African MG or AuthenticAfricanLife@gmail.com. Either one, you'll be able to get to me and we'll be able to talk directly. And I'll be able to give you some insight on exactly what some of the costs might be. I can show you some of the quotes that I've gotten to kind of help give you an idea of what you can expect to pay. So that's on the power front. So Aisha asked about 3 things: water, power, and wait, what was it? Water, power. What was the other thing you asked about, Aisha? Let me take a look here quickly. And internet. Okay, so let's go to water. On the water front. Now, depending on where you are, there is the Guma Valley Water Company, or most people just call it Guma. And Guma does pump water to certain areas in the capital city and around the country, as far as I understand, but mostly the capital city. And it is limited at best for many people. So, for example, where our property is, we have Guma coming to the property twice a week, Wednesdays and Saturdays, generally for about 45 minutes to an hour max. We're told it's supposed to be up to 4 hours. Other people get longer amounts of water. And that's just the thing. It's unpredictable depending on what line you're connected to, et cetera, et cetera. So that is one way that you can get your water. Other people have water tanks on their property and they just call a water company, either Guma or another, small private company, or people who work for Guma, who's, siphon off water and take it other places and do private trips. And they just get a Bowser and they just take the hose and pump it in directly into your tank. That is another way that people go about getting water. And then, of course, the way to maximize your water output which is dependent on where you are in the country, is to dig a well or borehole. So a well is just a bigger, obviously a bigger hole, and you can, you guys know what a well is. A well, just like any other water well you've seen in any other country, that is an option. A borehole is like a well. It's thinner. It's more expensive. I hear that wells are around $2,000 to $5,000. I hear boreholes are between $5,000 and $10,000, sometimes $15,000, depending on how deep you have to dig and who you're using to do it. Both of those instances, though, generally give you the opportunity to have kind of an unlimited water supply, as long as they dig deep enough and your area has free-flowing water. And so in those cases, you don't ever have to deal with the water company, pay a water bill in any of those instances. You just use the water that's under your land, right? So that is one way that you can go about. Those are the couple of different ways that you can go about getting water. And then lastly, there's the electricity. When it comes to electricity, there's a couple of different companies. And again, if you guys want me to sit down with you one-on-one and talk through the different options for the different electric companies, you can book a consultation with me. I can talk about what they are and how much they cost. Here's what I will say. There's a company called which is the overarching company that is offering fiber for most of the companies within the country, meaning they are taking a fiber optic cable, or basically just a cable, from the main internet station and connecting it all the way directly to your house, just like you do with power. If you guys are living in the States, you might be familiar with Verizon Fios. Verizon Fios has set up an underground cable network that connects all of these different homes with fiber optic cables, right? Fios is fiber optics. Fi is the fiber, O is the optic, right? And so that's the fiber optic cable. And so that is something that that is available in Sierra Leone, and that's also available in Ghana as well. Also available in Nigeria as well. Many countries on the continent of Africa have this fiber option, but usually it's not underground. In general, it kind of follows the same lines as like a telephone line. So it's up on those lines that go across, or even some of the electrical lines, right? It goes kind of across those. I would definitely recommend doing that. It's quite a bit more expensive. And again, like I said, if you guys want to hear some of what those prices look like, again, you can set up some consultations with me and we can go through what I've seen and what I've talked to. But yeah, so, or what I've talked to people about. But that's going to ensure you're going to have stronger internet connection with less breakage. However, if light goes out, then you lose that internet connection. So you definitely want to have a backup. And so generally, there's a couple of companies that have these things, MiFis. And I have I have a couple of different MiFis. So there are different versions of these. There's a couple companies in Sierra Leone that offer MiFis, right? So where's my MiFi? Where's my other MiFi? So you can do AfriCell, you could do QCell, you could do Orange. A bunch of different companies have these MiFis. And so these are basically like a wireless router. Like if you live in the West, you're used to having a wireless router, right? Where your internet is just connected to the wall and you just use this wireless router, right? You pay you buy your service, they come out, they connect you, and then you're just good. You might need to use these as backups. So I have a backup and another backup. So when my internet goes out, I don't have fiber at home just yet, but when I get fiber set up at home, I will have these as backups. The same thing in Ghana. When I was in Ghana, I had both of the major telephone carriers. I had MTN and Vodafone as fiber connected in the home. So I had two different routers, like two different physical routers. One that was on the shelf down here, one was on the shelf up here. If I had a power outage and it took a while for my apartment building to turn on the generator, then I had the MiFis. I had Surfline and I had Vodafone MiFis that I used. And so that was just always kind of the couple of backups that I had in case power went out for an extended period of time. I could do that. The same thing is going to be required in Sierra Leone, right? So you're going to want to have these kinds of MiFis, and this is what they look like. People carry this on their person, right? They carry this around with them all day, and this is what they're connecting to connect to the internet. Now, the thing about this is you obviously want to make sure they're charged. They have batteries in them. So, and they have rechargeable batteries in them. You don't actually take the batteries out. They have SIM cards in them as well. So that's how you pay for them. You pay through basically the same kind of telephone provider services that you normally pay, and they're usually offered by the telephone companies, the local telephone companies. QCell is a local telephone company in Sierra Leone, or offers telephone access in Sierra Leone, and Africell does as well. Orange also has MiFi's as well. I know some people who use Orange as well. So now we talk. So I think Aisha, I think we've answered your three questions, right? Water, internet, and electricity. So those are the things that you're going to have to do, and you're going to need to have backups. The thing about living on the continent of Africa, specifically West Africa, East Africa, there are challenges. It's a little bit more developed, specifically like in Nairobi and other places, but you need to have contingency plans in place. I mean, that's just the way it works in West Africa. And it doesn't matter if you're in Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone. And that is why I definitely I have always recommended, if you're coming to the continent of Africa, you have multiple streams of income, or at least a continuous stream of income, regardless of where you are on the planet, that is constantly coming in. If you're moving to West Africa, because then you can pay for all these contingencies, because it's going to cost you money, right? I mean, you're going to have to top these up. Depending on how you want to do it, you may have to top these up on an unlimited plan. Some of these unlimited plans are like $30 a month, but it can add up, right? If this is $30 a month, this one's $20 a month, and then you have one at home that's $100 a month. That's $150 a month to ensure you have unlimited Wi-Fi services in case one or two of these go down and you have backups, right? That's just for your internet. Then, of course, we were talking about the power, right? You have to make sure that you can pay for your power. So when I was in Ghana, I was topping up my electricity every 3 weeks or so with 400 Ghana cedis, 2 to 3 weeks with 400 Ghana cedis. In Sierra Leone, I'm topping up the electricity just about let's say probably about 200 leones every week and a half or so. And so, you have to keep in mind that you're going to have to constantly be shelling out money for the power. And then when the power is out, you have to use a generator. And in Sierra Leone, specifically right now through the end of April, they're doing some upgrades to the power system. And so from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., there is no power. And so if you have generators running that whole time, you can imagine you have to keep refueling that generator. So you have to go buy petrol, or, you have to go buy like gas from the gas station. And that is going to have to go into your generator. It's for your generator to continue to function. And so you have to have, money to continue to do that. Right. And so that's one of the biggest complaints I hear from people is like, man, I got to go buy. And if there's a fuel shortage, that's the other thing. If there's a fuel shortage, you have to stand in line like everybody else at the gas station to get it. So obviously that's the reason why, paying higher upfront fees for solar, maybe you can have a couple of batteries and that can last you for all those hours that you don't have power from the main power supply. That was needed. I needed to hydrate. So that is why it requires you to have money. All right, so now we got Elijah. Elijah Wade has some questions. So let's answer Elijah's question. So Elijah said, can you explain to the people the value of relationships and community in Sierra Leone that typically isn't the case in Western countries like America? Yeah, okay, I can speak to that. I mean, so one of the things that you'll find in what I've seen in my experiences across West Africa is it's not always going to be about your merit. As someone who's worked in advertising before, what I found a lot of times when you're pitching a brand or you're pitching an advertising agency, a lot of that comes down to, do they like hanging out with you? Do you go to games with them? Do you go to dinners with them? Do you take them out for drinks? Right? Do they have fun hanging out with you? Because then they want to continue doing business with you, right? That was something I saw coming from the advertising world. And I think that that's a very similar thing to consider when trying to do business or just living in West Africa. One of the things that you'll find is, you are going to be culturally a bit different, whether you are a first generation American or not. Culturally, just life is different. You've lived a different life. You've lived in a different world. Your viewpoints, your experiences are different, and it's going to take some time for you to ingratiate yourself in any new community. So it does take time, and you're going to have to build those relationships. And when it comes to doing business, it's going to be really important. People like to do business with people they like, know, and trust. And nepotism and working with people who are friends are far more likely to happen than people who are most qualified. That's just what it is, right? And so you find that a lot. And so you're gonna have to be. So the importance of building relationships is higher than you would anticipate anywhere else. I think those of you who've worked in sales before, you're a person who has to pitch another company or companies on something. You know what that feels like, because you have to build that relationship, that rapport with them before they start giving you money, right? As a salesperson, you're pitching them to come out of money to purchase a product or service that you have. That same thing applies for you in West Africa. And so, for me, living in Sierra Leone over the last year, that's been really important for me because it's helped me to build some of those relationships. It just takes time. Just takes time to build relationships. That's not something that's going to happen overnight. I got lucky getting my first job 3 months in to being on the continent of Africa. And that was because somebody I knew had developed a relationship with the CEO of Jumia in Ghana at the time. And so they had already developed a long-standing relationship. And all he had to do was just reach out to her and say, I have somebody that you should probably talk to about this open role that you have. And it didn't take much, within 2 weeks of having discussions, I had the job and a job offer in hand. But that was because of their relationship, and they had lived and known each other in Nigeria over a 6-year span. And so that just speaks to that point, right? They had built that relationship, and because of that relationship, I was able to get that job literally within like 2 weeks. And I'd been on the continent for 3 months, trying to figure out if I could find employment in Sierra Leone. Didn't really work out. Even though that wasn't necessarily my plan to stay in Sierra Leone, had I found something in Sierra Leone, I may not have moved to Ghana, right? Because I didn't book my ticket to go to Ghana right away. I had booked it while I was in Sierra Leone, and I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I could have gone back to Sierra Leone after a couple of weeks in Ghana had I found something in Sierra Leone, but I didn't. And to be honest, to this day, I hadn't been able to find a role in Sierra Leone that made sense or that I could actually come in and take over other people who had better relationships already. So to answer your question, Elijah, I think it's really, really important to have relationships for sure. That's a good point, and I'm glad you asked that question. So Elijah also asked, how much do you feel like being a member of a prominent family in Sierra Leone has helped you? That's a good question. I think that it really hasn't helped much because the family is not as well known as you might think. So in some cases, it's helped, after I start a conversation and tell them the family name, if they're from Bo or Kenema and they recognize the name. But my grandfather was chief over 60 years ago, and my great uncle was chief immediately following that for just about 7 years. So that direct connection, the only people who have a knowledge of that had to be alive back then, and they were children, and now they're old, right? So we're not old, but they're seniors, right? So so I don't think actually having the name has had really as much of an impact as you might think in terms of my everyday life. It has helped in some cases in terms of buying land in and around Bo, because that's where the family's from, and there are other people in the family that are alive now that people know. But it hadn't really helped much. Even meeting folks and members of government, which SLPP has historically been a political party that a lot of those guys have gone to Bo school, the school in Bo, where my paternal lineage is from, or at least the most recent paternal lineage is from. And so, yeah, but it really hasn't had that much of an impact. I know a lot of people think that it does, but not as much as you might think. Somebody mentioned this to me the other day, like, I'm sure that you, because of your family name, you've been able to do X, Y, and Z. And it is not actually the case. There's been a lot that I've had, a lot of hoops that I've had to jump through, just like anybody else, because I didn't have all the relationships what I'd like to have had. Had I had those relationships, things may have been a little bit different. All right, cool. So Aisha seems to have found my responses about electricity, water, and internet helpful. So that's good. Mr. London Boy for Life says, "What's good, Joe? I got a question. Advice on starting a business in Sierra Leone." Okay, good. So here's the question: how much roughly does it cost to? Okay, so let's start with this. So what's good? I got advice on. Okay, advice. I mean, it depends on what you're talking about. What kind of business? What business sector? Is it a physical business, product, services? I mean, those are all things that you're probably going to have to be a little bit more specific about. And if you want, I can speak to you specifically about this, or if you have general questions, you can do that. If you do want to do like a one-on-one consultation, you can set that up with me and we can like talk it through. But if you have any other questions, you can I can answer them. I can speak to this from a high level, just from my experience launching a social media agency. This is something I've talked about before. Sierra Leone is a country where the median income is about $50 a month, right? So that's the median income. We're also talking about a country with just around 8 million people. And they say there's about 1 million to 2 million people in Freetown. So we're talking about a very limited number of people that, your total addressable market, TAM, as some people like to call it, right? The total addressable market. How many people, if you've got 100% of your customers to be 100% of the population, how big is that market? And right, that's the total market, right? If you get 1% of that market, is a small amount, right? And then you have to think about how many people can afford certain products or services. So whatever business it is that you have, and whatever whoever your constituency is, whoever you're pitching for whatever business it is that you have, those are the things you have to take into consideration. Me, as a person who's running a social media agency, I know that it's a long sales cycle. I think I mentioned this to you guys before. I had 75 meetings before I got 3 clients. And those 3 clients actually came from one meeting. And that came from someone who actually runs an incubator. And those 3 clients went through that incubator, which, by the way, had to get a grant in order to afford the services. And they negotiated down the prices of my services, and they paid for it through that grant. And so those businesses, it was a 3-month commitment for all 3 of them. And all 3 of them at the end of the 3 months did not renew because they did not have the funding to do so. They're struggling to keep their businesses alive. Many people who have businesses in Sierra Leone have another job and they have a business on the side, right? Many people have side hustles, and the side hustles is like a second job. But that is kind of what you can expect. So not too many businesses, if you're doing business to business type stuff, not too many businesses have that much funding. If you can get into the NGO sector, which is something I'm working to do, they are more flush with cash, can generally pay a little bit more in some instances. I right now am in conversations with an NGO who I thought would have had the funding, and they're playing the game of, okay, what department is the funding coming out of? Finance doesn't have an answer. The country manager is still trying to work out the details, and this is an ongoing conversation for months. So you just got to know that it's a long sales cycle. Now, if you're doing direct to consumer and you have a business that you're selling products to people, then you have to price it right, and you have to understand that not everybody can afford certain things. So you have to take that in consideration, especially because most of the stuff that you're going to offer direct to consumer is going to come from outside of the country. If it's going to come up from outside of the country, you're going to have to pay to get it into the country. And what that process looks like means that you're going to have to try to figure out how to make margins on products that you've just had to spend money to get even in before you can even sell it. All right. So Mr. London Boy for Life says, how much roughly does it cost to buy a house outside of Freetown? It varies. It varies. You can find anything from, 30,000 to 100,000 to 150,000. It all depends on who's selling that house and how ambitious they are, right? Some people ask for exorbitant pricing. For example, I met a lady who had a 2-bedroom house not unfinished in Lungay that she was trying to sell for $100,000. That's where the airport is, right? She was trying to sell that for $100,000. I met another person. This was in Freetown, but it was closer to IMAT, like on the way out to Regent. So it was on the outskirts of Freetown, Western area. She was trying to charge $50,000 for just the land, and there was like a little small 2-bedroom little house on the land, but no car or even no bike, like motorcycle, could get to the house. You had to stop far away and then walk. And she still was trying to charge $50,000 for that house, that land. And the land was really, really, really steep and unruly and just hard to manage. And that's still what she wanted to charge for it. So, pricing, it's a funny thing, right? Because pricing is always going to be based on the market. And in Sierra Leone, you've had these instances where people who deal in illicit activity, government officials, government officials, people who had worked in the mining industries previously had inflated the prices of everything, right? It really helped increase the prices of things. So, Dream Atlantic Garden Villas, I mentioned this before, we're charging a minimum of $700,000 for a 5-bedroom house, right? Not worth it for sure. But then you also had Reggie Manuel Estates in Godrich, and they were charging a minimum of $300. Well, $300 now. They've gone down in price, but it was $400 when I had first gone and looked at them. And Godrich is still technically Freetown, but it's on its way to the outskirts on the peninsula. And so, look, I mean, housing prices are just going to vary depending on the seller. The market here, there's comps is like, you can try to look at comps, but it's impossible because it's not like you have an MLS where you can look at comps and be like comparables, I should say. So, in the United States, you have the MLS where they look at comparables, right? A real estate agent will come to you and say, here are some of the other homes that have sold in your area, similar size and, square footage and number of rooms, similar upgrades, this is what you can expect to get. And so you price accordingly. You don't really have that in Sierra Leone. So what you have is people just throwing prices out there, just like hoping for the best. So I hope that answers your question. It's hard to answer that question because it varies so much. Elijah Wade is asking, how much is one-on-one consultation and how do we book it? So if you want to do a one-on-one consultation, right now I'm offering it for $50 an hour at this very moment, just right now. So at the time of this video, that is what I'm offering it for. If you're watching this video 2 years from now, that will not be the price. Or even 2 months from now, likely won't be the price. That's what I'm offering it for right now. I will put a link to how to get to the consultation here in the chat here. Let me see if I can get it into the chat so that you guys can just book it directly. In the meantime, let me see if there's any other questions while I look this up. Okay, so let me also say something else about the topic of real estate, because this question comes up a lot. And the question that they have is, how do I know I'm getting my money's worth? So here's something you should do, right? Anytime you're working with a contractor and they come to you and say, here's the price of everything. Depending on the contractor, you want to get them to itemize what they're buying. This thing costs this much and I'm buying 3 of them. This thing costs this much, I'm buying 2 of them. And you can just see the math right there. Then you have their labor cost. They can decide however much they want to charge for labor. So that's something that is generally negotiable. Now, if you have time on your hands and you're in the country, or you want to pay somebody else to do it, they can actually go to a couple of shops and do the window shopping on your behalf. So I think that those are things that you should probably take into consideration when you're thinking about how you're going about that process, right? So I'm going to put some links in here depending on what you guys want to do for the consults. Here's a couple of links. Let me see if the comment actually got posted. But you could just click on there. So shout out to Aisha for giving me a quick what do you call it, testimonial on the live. So Aisha said the consults are worth it. He says an hour usually goes over, so you get your money. I have my Airbnb in Ghana now off from 2 consults with Joe. I mean, you can't get a better testimonial than that. Shout out to Aisha. Thank you for that. But yeah, true, very true. You know, as you guys know, I do like to wax poetic. I do talk a lot. And I don't stick strictly to the hour. You know, if we go a little over the hour, because, you know, we're having a conversation and, you know, it's conversational, right? You know, it's professional, but it's conversational. I do want to get to know you, get to understand what you're trying to do to help give you the best possible advice that I can give you. Right. And so, yeah. So, I mean, I love that Aisha gave that testimonial. Now I put all the links there, but I realized it didn't copy the way I wanted it to. So what I'm going to do is and it broke it up into parts. So let me just put the consultation link in the chat, because I don't know what that was. So apologies on that. Let me just do just the one link, and then we'll make it easy. SB says hi, new subscriber from the UK. Shout out to SB. Thank you for subscribing. All right. So let me see here. Now I just got the consultation link, so I'm going to send it. Here we go. My internet's acting a bit, not my internet, but my computer is acting a bit crazy right now. I have used up all the bandwidth on this thing. So, all right, cool. All right, so you guys asked a lot of good questions right here on the live, and so I'm glad you did, and I got a chance to answer those questions for you. What I will also do is I'll answer some other questions that have come up, and these are some interesting questions, and so I thought it was important that I'd go through some of these. Okay, so SB had a question before I get into my questions. Is it best to move to Africa with my savings or an income? And yeah, so you may have missed that part earlier, but definitely with an income. You want to have an ongoing income. You have to pay for contingencies that you don't have to in other places. And we talked about some of those a little earlier, so you may want to go back and watch the replay of the live. But yeah, you're going to have additional costs that are unexpected, and you are going to need to be able to pay for them. If you come with just your savings, you will run out of savings. Very many people do that, and very many people run out of savings. I met people who moved to Sierra Leone on a whim, kind of like I did, and they lasted 3 months. I've known other people who moved to Sierra Leone on a whim and stayed 10 years, you know, and are still living in Sierra Leone. Same thing with Ghana, though. I've known people who moved on a whim, were there for a couple months and are gone. Senegal, too. I knew somebody in Senegal and a couple other countries where they born and raised in the West. They moved to West Africa thinking like, because one of the common misconceptions is, and this is an interesting one, and this was one that I actually had too. You kind of have this arrogance growing up in the West, like, obviously I can get a job over someone else. Like, they're not going to be able to beat me. And if it's interview one-on-one, me versus them, I got this. And I used to think that here in the States anyway, just because of how I approached the interview process. But when I got to West Africa, what I found is there are some very, very talented people here who have gone to the same schools or better than you, decided to move back and have the network that you don't have. And so that helps them a lot. Also, a lot of times a master's degree is required for not necessarily saying it's required, but valued higher. I do not have a master's degree. So that is one of the things that I've noticed that comes up in terms of jobs on the continent is folks with a master's degree. And that's just something that they highly value on the continent of Africa. So yeah, that is something that I think was an eye opener too. Especially when I got to Ghana and I met all the different Nigerians, and the Nigerians, the very talented Nigerians that have a high level jobs in Sierra Leone as well. There are a lot of Nigerians, very, very talented Nigerians, smarter than anybody I've ever worked with in the U.S. That's for sure. I met a lot of people who failed upwards when I lived in the United States. You don't really get that opportunity a lot, depending on especially in the private sector, and unless you got companies that are like stealing money or whatever. But in general, like legitimate companies, you have some very, very, very talented people at the high ends of these companies, and it's not just your everyday average people. These are extraordinary people. And so don't think that just because you've lived in the West and you've worked at, let's say, Hulu, like I did, or any other companies and made any significant amount of money, that you can just come to the continent of Africa and you're just going to get a job, or you're just going to be able to excel easily in the business world, because it's not always the case. In many cases, is if you've made a name for yourself throughout the community in the diaspora of that country or throughout that country, then yeah, you can. But in general, it's going to require a network and some luck. But it definitely is going to require a lot. So that's a long way to answer your question, and I know I kind of answered other questions in that, but you definitely want to move with an income. And like I said earlier in this live, you want to come with an income that is an ongoing, persistent income. Do not come there with telling your job that you're going home for the summer or whatever. You got a remote job and you're trying to work on their hours, and they think you're in, they think you're in Texas. I knew someone who told their job that they went to Texas, and they were in Sierra Leone, and they were working on Central Time Zone hours. And obviously there was a little bit of burnout because their day was ending at like 1 a.m. And then the issue came to IT, and they're like, "Oh, just put your laptop in the mail, and we'll pick it up, and we'll just send you one back." And that's where they ended up getting into a little bit of trouble, because they couldn't do that. It just wasn't that easy. And so, that's the other thing too. Is like you need to have a source of income that works for you, no matter where you are in the world, right? And that will not dry up anytime soon. That you can expand on while on the continent. And you got to give yourself this too. I will say this: any business you're starting, give yourself 5 to 10 to 15 years if you are new to the continent. Any like physical goods business, right? Any business in America takes that long, to be honest with you, to really scale a business, right? Most businesses do not scale quickly. First of all, 90+% of businesses fail anyway, right? That's just to be honest. Most businesses fail. So now you're talking about a place where the infrastructure is not as developed and the marketplace is not as developed. So if you're going to start a business, you know that it's going to take time for it to grow and scale. And many times that's going to require relationships. I have a friend who has a clothing business. She buys clothes abroad and sells them locally in Sierra Leone. Many of the people who her first customers were her friends. I have another friend who was in these different college groups. Both of them are Sierra Leonean. She started selling clothes and other things to people she was in these college groups with. And she had a business for a while where she was selling clothes and people got to know her. And now she's taking it more seriously, but she's had this business for 3 years. Both of them have had the businesses for 3 to 4 years, and they're just starting to see some real traction where they're like, all right, I'm happy about the revenue I'm generating from this. So these are people who born, raised, grew up, friendship circles in different groups, party with this group, went to college with this group, family members, friends of these people's sister-in-law, and these people, they have all these different groups that they know. And it still has taken time to grow. So just want to make sure that is taken into consideration. And I think Aisha is just seconding what I said about making sure you have an income stream. It ain't cheapo. It's not cheap at all. No easy. Andy G says, rental income or dividends from mutual funds can sustain you in Africa. Yeah, I think it depends on what kind of house you have and how much you're renting it for, right? So I think, if you have, it depends on where you're renting your house, right? Some people only profit $800 a month from rental income in the United States, right? That's great as a supplemental, right? An additional income to something you already have. But if that's your only income, That's not going to work. And if you're talking about dividends, it's the same thing, right? It depends on how much you have invested in those places, right? 401ks, et cetera, all those kinds of things that you can draw from. I guess a 401k you don't want to continue to pull from. But yeah, I mean, if you have a source of residual income, that's great. But that source of residual income is going to need to give you at least $2,000 a month. You need to be making minimum on just a kind of a steady flow of income, $2,000 a month, which is $24,000 a year, which you might think is not a lot of money, and it's not, but you need at least that to be able to kind of sustain a living, And again, you're not going to be able to do all the things we talked about, right? Have all the internet services, have all the backups with solar and all of that. You're just not going to have the funding to do that if you do it at that rate. So we really need to talk about having a real substantial income. You know, you want to be making at least $50,000 a year to live in a country like Sierra Leone, to be able to do all the things that I was just talking about. Trust me on that. The costs can add up. So Reginald is saying, I'm going to Ghana tomorrow and I'm at Walmart. What is the best mosquito repellent? That's a good question. I don't know, because I didn't buy mosquito repellent in the States, but everybody loves Off in the States. There are also others. So Andy G says, Andy G says 2K a month is a lot in Africa. I think you're mistaken, Andy. To be honest with you, I'm just gonna have to respectfully disagree. It's not a lot in Africa, especially if you're coming from the West. You know, I think that a lot of people are mistaken in just thinking that like $2,000 a month is going to cover everything. If you have a house pre-built, you're not renting. So if you're not renting a house, if you're not renting at all on the continent, then that you eliminated that cost. That's great, because you do have to pay a year upfront rent, right? So that might be $3,000 right there, might be $6,000, depending on how much you want to pay, how much your monthly rent is, right? Now, you know, we just talked about all the things that we talked about in terms of all the backups. You want to just kind of live with all of these things and you want to reduce your headaches. That's already $1,000 a month right there. If you're just trying to reduce all your headaches, you know, and let's say you want a vehicle, you want a vehicle or transportation, but definitely having a vehicle is going to cost you upwards of, like, let's say $400 a month, with costs to fix the car on whatever particular occasions there are, putting gas in the car, you know, just the regular maintenance, wear and tear. You're gonna have at least $400 a month, and I think I'm being generous by saying 400. But let's say that's the max, 400. So that's a vehicle. Whatever your rent is, let's say your rent's $300 a month. That's already $700 a month. Not to mention your internet, your phone, your food, your internet, food, and electricity. And water, not so much. So yeah, I mean, trust me on this. So that's already half your income if you had $2,000 a month. Now the extra $1,000 can go into other things, but I would definitely say you want to be making at least $50K to live comfortably in West Africa, and not to mention if you're a person who likes to go out. If you like to go out, you like to, you know, drink alcohol, eat food out, then those costs are going to add up, right? And so you can find a way to make $2,000 feel like a lot if you greatly minimize your expenses. But if you at all want to mimic a lifestyle in the West, which most people do when they get to West Africa, even if you try to reduce it just a bit, $2,000 a month is going to be the minimum you can do it on. I would say it'd be the minimum you can do it on. Take it from me as someone who's lived on the continent, who has some businesses, replace some employees, but also just like walk around, and I don't drink alcohol anymore at all. So yeah, that would be what I would say. Yeah, so SB says it also depends on your lifestyle, but yeah, but I just named you what could cost you $1,000 a month, and we haven't talked about other aspects of lifestyle that we don't need to get into here. So SB says, what are your thoughts on living between African country and the West? Yeah, I mean, I think that's the best thing to do. I think the best thing to do is to go back and forth. I have some family members who I've kind of seen how they've done it, and I admire the way they're doing it. They're spending 15 years or so preparing for retirement, building different income streams, buying land, building property, things like that. And I've seen what they've been able to do and what they're working towards. And it's going to be very smooth sailing for them when they decide to move full time. And they still may have one of the two of the married couple still coming back and forth and still generating income in the States and still having all of those supplemental income streams. Ideally, you get to a place where you have residual income streams on the continent that cover all of your costs on the continent. And then eventually even more than that. Or you then have other income coming in from outside that you can also add to it. But yeah, I mean, to me, I think the best thing to do is to be able to go back and forth and to be able to generate revenue elsewhere to be able to add to your lifestyle on the continent. All right, lots of good questions, comments, thoughts. I appreciate all of them. Okay, so let's also get into this next question. So I had a couple of questions that people would ask me. And one of the questions that people would ask me a lot was, would I ever move back to the United States? And I think that's an interesting question because when I first moved to the continent, I was like, no, never. I also had some cash on hand. And I also had a lot of ambitions about things that I was going to do, illusions of grandeur, as they say. And so I had a lot of thoughts and ideas about how quickly things were going to move, especially because I had a network in Sierra Leone already. I was going through the interview process in Ghana, and I actually got a job in Ghana. So I was like, yeah, no, I would never move back. And I probably would be back and forth. I don't think I'd ever be in a place where I would stay in the United States forever and never move back to the continent of Africa. That's just, I can't see that. But I definitely see a world where there's a hybrid model where I'm sometimes there or sometimes here because I'm in the United States right now, sometimes there. And my goal is to have a residence in every country I visit. So I'm starting in West Africa with Sierra Leone, Ghana, and Nigeria. And then I'm going to work my way west to Nairobi. And I do want to eventually work my way south to South Africa and have a place there. And so my goal is to be able to generate income from those properties while I am gone, and then to be able to stay in those properties when I'm there for an indefinite period of time. So that's my goal, right? I have the option of having a place to stay in New York City that I'm on the lease of since 2004. In about 2 months, it will literally make 20 years since I signed that lease. I am older than you might think for those of you who are new to the live. And so, yeah, I've been on the lease of this apartment in Brooklyn, New York since June 15th, 2004. And so it's a rent stabilized apartment. I have the option of being able to go back there. And in 2022, I was there for 2 stints at a time, 2 months at a time. So I was there 4 months out of the year in 2022, staying in that apartment in Brooklyn, New York. And I will be spending more time there throughout the year, this year in 2024. And I'll definitely give you guys more insight into some of the things that are going on later on down the line as we solidify those plans. And I'll talk you guys through that, and I'll do a whole live about that. But yes, I definitely recommend you live in both places. So the idea of would I would ever move back? Now the answer is sort of yes, back and forth. I remember with an emphatic no. Who asked me this? I think I did an interview with Rochelle, or maybe I did an interview with Rochelle Clark, who is a pretty prominent YouTube channel, or it may have been the interview I did with Vanessa Camby, where I was asked, would you ever move back? And both of those interviews were done within the first 4 months of moving to the continent and within the first month of doing the YouTube channel. And I was like, yeah, no, never moving back. And I still believe that to some degree, right? I don't think it'll be my sole residence in the United States, but I can't say that I would never be in the US for extended periods of time. There's just no way that I can say that. You guys see me and hear me? Can you guys give me a thumbs up? Let me know if you can see and hear me. It looks like I'm taking up too much bandwidth on this computer. It's getting a little hot. Sorry, so I just unplugged the light. Can you guys see and hear me? Give me a thumbs up so I know you guys can see me and you guys can hear me. Give me a second to try to turn the light on without plugging it into my computer. Let's try this again. Let's get that light back. There we go. So the light's back, but it's not in my laptop. My laptop was going nuts just now. I have put too much into this laptop. Okay, so here's some questions. So Manalek and Tim Black said you can hear me. Okay, so Tim Black had a question. So Tim Black's question is what? I was worried about banking. I hear a lot of people have problems with local banks and money transfers and just accessing the U.S. accounts. Is that true? I mean, there's a lot there. So let me explain one thing to you guys. I think this is really interesting. So being on the continent of Africa, a lot of times, a lot of us move around Africa as if each country is a state. It feels like a state because you can easily get from one place to another, especially for those of us who lived in the United States. People in Europe understand this a little bit differently because they travel between countries frequently and it's very close to do so, right? So people from England get on a train and go to Spain or go to France or whatever, and they just be here and there, Italy, whatever. As in the United States, generally you don't travel to most people, don't travel to Canada or Mexico on a quick trip, right? It's vacation, it's a process, right? So you're reminded like this is a trip to another country, right? When you're living on the continent of Africa, you'll find a bank, let's say EcoBank, UBA, that operates in both countries, right? So I have a UBA account in Ghana, but I do not have one in Sierra Leone. If I have an issue with my debit card and I walk into the UBA in Sierra Leone, they cannot help me. They can't. I spent a significant amount of time working to try to get a bank account fixed, some challenges fixed, and they could not fix it. I mean, the person in Sierra Leone is on the phone with the person in my account rep in Ghana. My account rep in Ghana is working with tech, and it's this whole long process, and still it was not fixed, right? So that's number one. They operate as completely separate entities in different countries. I also had the same issue with EcoBank. When I have an EcoBank account in the US, in Sierra Leone, I went to Nigeria and the card wasn't working on one of the machines, on an EcoBank machine. Same thing with UBA card not working on a UBA machine in Sierra Leone. And again, I walked into the bank in Lagos and they're like, I don't know, ask your people in Sierra Leone. We don't know why it's not working. I'm like, this says EcoBank. You are EcoBank. What do you mean? You don't know? We don't know. You ask them. So that's just a process. And this is something you need to know. And these are multinational banks. These are not small banks, right? And so you need to keep that and take that into consideration. So those things can happen. So you always want to, when you go into a new country, go there with cash that you can convert to their local currency, just in case you have any issues. That's number one. Number two, as it pertains to your U.S. bank account, those debit cards work everywhere. It's just the fees that go along with utilizing those cards in another country. So some banks have exorbitant fees when you're going to another country and utilizing those cards. There are many ATMs in West Africa that do not accept MasterCard cards. Most Visas are fine. MasterCards are challenging and many different ATMs don't accept MasterCards. So that's the other thing. You'll go to an ATM and you're like, why isn't this working? And you have to see your card says MasterCard and it says Visa only or whatever. We'll just say Visa. So that's the other thing is there's like little nuances that you may or may not know. But in general, your debit card should work at an ATM across West Africa. And across Africa in general, you can pull money out. That should not be an issue. Transferring money is different. You're going to have to, wire money. You can wire for whatever your $50 fee or whatever your fee is. Then your local bank will take a fee. I know that we've discovered that EcoBank You wire money to EcoBank. It's $50 fee. EcoBank also takes $20 of a fee. So you sending the money. Let's say you're sending $100, right? You have to send $150 for $100 to get over to Sierra Leone for EcoBank, but then EcoBank takes $20 or some fee, may not be 20, but takes a fee of that. And so now, let's say it was just a $20 fee because that's what we've seen with another transaction. So $80 actually arrived. So you sent $150, but $80 arrived in country. That's how that can work when you're doing wires from the United States to Sierra Leone EcoBank in particular. The other thing to keep in mind is, there are different money transfer services. Remittance is huge, right? Because a lot of our diaspora is taking care of family back home, right? This is how Africa works. And so a lot of times they're like, you have World Remit, you have Remitly, you have RIA is another way that people send money across the continent. I mean, there are different ways that people send money. They're all complicated and convoluted depending on the country you're sending it to and where you're sending the money from. And so these are things that you just have to learn and try and figure out on your own as you go along, because they're all different services. Western Union is another option. MoneyGram's another option. Those options are still available to send money to the continent of Africa. It's really just going to be contingent on what you work best with, and if you want to use an app to do so, they all have apps, but they all come with their own challenges and issues. Okay, I hope that answers your question, Tim. If you have any more specific questions, definitely let me know. I tried to answer your question by coming at it from different angles. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay. So the question of would I ever move back was one. One of the things that people ask me a lot is, what do I miss about the US? Many occasions I've talked about what I miss about living in Ghana. And then when I was in Ghana, people would ask me what I miss about Sierra Leone. So I've answered those questions. What I haven't answered is what I miss about, okay, so Tim said it did answer his question. Good. What I haven't answered is what I miss about living in the States. And I would say when I was in Ghana, there were a lot of similarities in things that you can do in the States versus in Ghana. So for instance, we live in a world today where I like to explain this to people from the baby boomers, right? What I explain to them a lot is your phone is a remote control for the real world now. When I lived in the US and when I lived in Ghana, I had apps that could do my laundry, have a summon a car, summon food, summon dates, even, right? All through apps. That is how the world works today, especially in the United States. Almost everything you want to do, there's not only an app for that. They say there's an app for that. There's not only an app for that, there are multiple apps. So you can actually do comparison shopping. Ghana also has that, right? So, all the major dating apps, use that, store that, get that out the way. You also, and same thing in Sierra Leone for dating apps. But in Ghana, you have laundry services, you have dry cleaning services, sometimes both, the same company does both. You have Glovo for food, you have Jumia food, you have Yango has a food, then you have Uber, Bolt. You have different options, and Yango for car services. So you have different options in Ghana. Sierra Leone does not have many of those options, right? So you don't have ride sharing services. You don't have food delivery app capabilities. And so you do find that it can be a bit challenging, for those basic things that you might be used to, living in the West. And so that's one of the things that I do miss living in the West, is just the ease and the access to many different things. Also, I'm just young enough that almost my entire adult life, I've never had to use cash. Everything I've done has been through a debit card or a credit card, living in the United States, right? So I got so used to just using my card everywhere. At some point, we were tapping cards. Then you're using your phone, Google Pay, boom, Apple Pay, boom, on a device, and everything has a POS, a point of sale, boom, boom, boom. You can use your card. There are even places now, like I was in the airport in Brussels. They didn't take cash in Brussels. And many of the different restaurants, you had to use a card to be able to access food, which was annoying because I didn't have my card on me, and I had only had cash, and they couldn't take my cash. So now some of them did take cash, but the ones that I was trying to buy food from did not. And so, these are the things that I think that I do miss, is like that convenience. There's definitely a convenience. And, the US is big on overindulgence. So anything you want is everywhere. He's like food example, like if you log into Uber Eats, there's so many options for food. If I want vegan options for food, like in Brooklyn, where I have a dwelling, if I want to order food now where I stay when I'm in Brooklyn, it's easy. I have like 6 vegan options within a mile radius. Easy. Food's there to me in 45 minutes. Done. When I was in Ghana, you have the option, but there are going to be limits to the kind of foods that you can get and how late you can get food. Right? In the US, I found that there are different places that are open. There's always something open at any given time of night. You want Domino's at 2 a.m., you can get Domino's at 2 a.m. Right? Or whatever it is, whatever that might be, right? When I was in Ghana, there were more options that were open later than when I'm in Sierra Leone, right? And so these are just some of the things that you're going to miss living wherever you might decide you want to live. And every country is a little bit different. And you guys want to consult with me and talk to me about what that process looks like, more than happy to help you with that. Because there always is a little bit of a difference and a nuance between the different countries, depending on which country you are in and what it is you are looking to do. But just keep in mind, there are going to be some things that you're going to miss from living in the States. One of the other things that I miss is just how certain things are just built in, right? So if you live in an apartment building in the United States, generally, hot water is just built in. You just turn on the hot water and hot water runs. And if it doesn't, you're calling on maintenance, like, what's going on? Why isn't there hot water? Which is rare, but it happens. In West Africa in general, you need to install hot water heaters. So you might get an apartment like I did. And I was like, man, the water is kind of cool. I don't even when I put it on hot, I put it all the way on hot. I don't know why it's not hot. And I remember talking to the management of the building. He's like, you don't have a hot water heater. Why would it be hot? I was like, oh, it didn't come with a hot water heater? I thought you said it came with a hot water heater. He said, no, I didn't say that, number one. And number two, you didn't look inside the bathroom. You don't see a hot water heater. And I'm like, oh, you're right. So in the US, hot water heaters are hidden in the wall or in a space. They're stored somewhere. At least not in my experience in Ghana or Sierra Leone or Nigeria, from most cases that I saw. You find a hot water heater that sits outside in the bathroom somewhere, hanging up there, and that's regulating your hot water. So that's one of the things I miss, for sure. Kwame says UK and Europe is the same as US, cashless mainly. Yes, of course. Tim Black says, I don't understand why Africa's internet is dependent on Europe. That's crazy to me. Yeah, I mean, look, the internet service providers, a lot of them are from Europe. I mean, Orange Telecom is a French company. Orange, if you listen to them say it. And so, yeah, I mean, Orange is one of the major companies in Sierra Leone. It's a foreign company that operates there. Also, the internet fiber connections that a lot of people have, where you saw with Ivory Coast and a few other countries that were really impacted by that cable cutting. Yeah. And you have Google adding a cable. You have Google who does satellites. You have all kinds of different things. But yeah, generally, yeah, the continent of Africa is dependent on the outside world for these utilities. One other question people had for me is, how do I make money on the continent of Africa? A lot of people had questions about that. And so that's a good question. So I have multiple streams in which I generate income. I won't go through all of them, but I will mention some of them here. So one of the things I've decided to do with this platform was, it had advertising revenue. I'm also looking at particularly subscription services. working on merchandise, e-commerce store. Those are all things that I'm putting in the works. But in terms of what I do now, I have a social media agency where I do have, well, I've had clients and then new clients renewing, where they pay monthly retaining fee to utilize my services. I also have consulting clients in the United States that I had been working with. Now, some of that has dried up because the longer you're away, the less people are going to utilize you for those services. I also get paid commissions for sales that I do for particular businesses. So that allows me to not have to work full time, but also can, make introductions here or there, make a sale, make a percentage of that sale. And, that's a, okay, different additional revenue stream. So those are all ways that I have generated revenue. I also, the consulting calls have a little bit to go along with, $50 an hour, not much, but those are all things that you can add to it. But like mostly it's the consulting I do within the United States. That's really where most of the money is going to come from, right? From me. And then of course I've had jobs as well. And there are other things too, affiliate programs for different things that I do. These are other things that are part of the list of income streams that I have. It's a conversation that comes up often, so that's how I would answer that. There's much more to that, much deeper. If you guys want to know the specifics on that, I'm more than happy to do that on a Patreon, where you'd have to pay to get those details. I'm not going to give everything away for free on a free platform, especially when these platforms generate challenges for me to get out to the general public. So I'll make sure that I get to, a smaller group of folks who are really, really interested in these things, where I can go deeper into those topics for those people. Okay, cool. We have now been live for 1 hour and 21 minutes. Do you guys have any more questions for me? As you can see, I'm not as tired as I normally am because I'm in the US right now, and I've now started to adjust just a little bit to the timing. So I've been able to, it's even though it's 10:23 GMT, I'm on Eastern Standard Time right now, and it's, what time is it? Eastern Standard Time, 6:23. So yeah, that is the time, and that's why I'm not like falling asleep on a live right now like I normally do once it goes past 10 o'clock. Any other questions before we go? It's a pretty big, pretty well attended, I should say, live. You guys have been really good with asking questions, giving your comments and feedback. So I really appreciate that. Shout out to all the people who always show up. Aisha's been around forever, and Aisha gave the greatest of testimonials for the consulting. And I want to go back to that again, because if you guys want to know what someone who's gone through a consultation thinks, read this. Consults are worth it. He says an hour. It usually goes over, so you get your money's worth. You get your money. I have my Airbnb in Ghana now, all from 2 consults with Joe, right? So it's helpful, as you can imagine. So book those consultations if you want to have one-on-one conversations with me specifically about what it is that you're looking to do on the continent. And I do everything from, if you want to move to Sierra Leone to West Africa somewhere, I can go. The $50 an hour is just like basic communication. If you want to get something done on your behalf, your passport, renewal, driver's license, other things like that, if you already have a passport and you're a national, you want to get residency cards, all those kinds of things, I can do all of that stuff too. That comes as a separate fee, and those fees are to be disclosed if you are serious about doing that, and we get to that point where we're going to talk about how to get that done. But yeah, all of those things are things that I offer. Also, I do one-on-one consults for people who want to build a social media platform. Obviously, we've, through your help, we've amassed a little over 390 or so thousand people on the platform. We're slowly approaching 400. Hopefully we get to 500 before the middle of the year across all platforms. And so we're almost at 500,000 followers across all platforms, thanks to you guys. And so I can show you how to do that. if you have questions on that for your own business. I also have the social media agency. If you're a Pan-African business or business that focuses on Africans in the diasporans or in the diaspora, I actually can run your social media for you. I have a team, mostly Nigerians, who are on point, who can manage your pages for you. They do not get your logins. Don't do that. Do not do that. They will not get your logins. They will be through LastPass. So I obviously will have to get your logins for any of your social media platforms, but anybody who does work for me, they log in through LastPass, so they don't actually see your password. So if you need someone to manage your social media, your Pan-African business or business focused on Africa and the diaspora, let me know. I can help with that. So yeah, so those are some of the other things that I can consult with. I can consult one-on-one for those things too. I also, if you want to book your vacation to the continent of Africa or anywhere that has an African influence, whether that's in Europe somewhere or Latin America, I have a way that you can do that. You can do that through one of my links, through my link tree. Again, those links will be in the description as well. The link tree link will be in the description as well. And then what else do we want to talk about? What else do I have? Those are the main things that I offer for people. So if those are the things that you're looking for, I can help you with those things. And if you watch this far along, then you may be interested in those things. I'm more than happy to help you with that. All right, with that, guys, we're at 1 hour and 26 minutes. I always want to thank you. Well, I want to thank you guys for for being here, for genuinely engaging in the discussions, asking questions, helping other people understand what's going on. Kwame says hello. Sorry, just want to acknowledge that. Kwame also says, "Wow, Joe, you do really well. Thank you." Tim Black says, "Are you going to do meetups since you in the USA?" Not this trip, because this trip is going to end in the USA on Thursday of this week, so I just don't have the ability to do it now. But I will be doing meetups for sure in the coming months. I will say that. I can't say when. It hasn't been decided as of yet, but just know some things are coming, and I'm going to make some announcements. And you guys will know when that happens. I will definitely be doing meetups. But just know this summer there will be meetups in different cities. There'll be meetups in different cities this summer, and you'll have the opportunity to buy some merch. You'll have the opportunity to interact with other people who are like-minded. Maybe you'll find a future spouse. Maybe you'll find lifelong friends. Maybe you'll just find good conversation. But the goal is to get like-minded people together to talk about these things, to help each other out, just in the same way that you guys do in the chat. We want to do this in person. And so there's a couple different cities that I'm looking at that are heavy in the West African diaspora, or people who are focused on West Africa. So we will make those announcements when the time comes. But trust me, they are coming. They are coming. We have been have too many conversations recently about live shows and meetups and things. These things are all coming, and now that the platforms are bigger, we can probably get other people that you guys might be familiar with to do some of these. So I look forward to starting to put some of these things together and get some of the people that we all know and we find interesting to kind of meet in person, and you guys get a chance to see them. So with that. That is all for this week. As you guys might know, I didn't go live with African Stream this week, and I didn't go live with Sierra Leoneans Killing It. My morning was pretty booked up with other things, personal things, as I mentioned before. But next week, we will be going live with African Stream and Sierra Leoneans Killing It, and I'll have this live again next Monday. So all 3 lives will be happening next Monday. At the times that you know them to be. So stay tuned for that. Make sure you turn on post notifications. Make sure you share this with anybody who has any questions about what it might be like to live on the continent, right? Those questions that you guys asked are questions that many people have, and I want to make sure that we get them those answers. All right, so with that, guys, thanks for watching. I will see you all on the next video.